Hello again. So this is definitely strange because I'm used to going live every few days, and here I am going live like 20 minutes after the last live. But I did have some really cool thing happen just now. So some of you know that I have a series called the Fairhope series. This is my only contemporary romance series, and it's not young adult, it's new adult, meaning they're like college age. And the first book in that series, The Trouble with Goodbye, is really, really close to my heart for various reasons, but mostly because even though it is not my story, it is kind of a cathartic sort of retelling or revisiting of something that happened in my own life that was tragic and traumatic. And it also kind of goes back to the experience that I had living in Hawkinsville, although this is a fictional town of Fairhope, Georgia. And there is actually a Fairhope, Alabama, which I did not know at the time that I wrote this, but we are thinking of potentially going there on our trip because it's near Pensacola when we're start to head west. So it was one of those things of like, hey, there is Fairhope, maybe we'll go there. But anyway, this is a series that I started back in 2013 and actually finished, I believe, in 2016. So there's 6 books in the series. And last year I had the covers redone by Najla Kwamba, who also did my logo up here, and the covers for the Willow Harbor series. And she also did the covers for the as yet unrevealed Summer of Ghost Stories books like The Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw, which I will get to show you guys someday. Those covers are incredible. But I have been trying to get a BookBub feature deal. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with BookBub. So this is, I've left my microphone further away. Hopefully you can still hear me. Hopefully that's better. I guess we'll see on the replay. But I have been trying to get a BookBub feature deal for that Trouble with Goodbye for over a year. I have submitted it more than 6 or 7 times in the past year, and it keeps getting rejected because if you are a reader and you subscribe to the BookBub email, you know that every day they send out deal emails where they send you different categories that you signed up for. So if you like young adult or you like romance, you've selected those boxes of the genres that you like, and they'll send you deals. But they don't just randomly select those. Authors apply for it or publishers apply for it. And then if you get featured, you pay for that feature to go in there. And then it gets sent out to millions of people. And it's probably the single most valuable newsletter list out there for getting your book into the hands of other people. And I know there are thousands of people who have read my books because of BookBub, but it has been, I think, 2 years or more now since they've actually included me in one of their emails, because it just gets more and more competitive, and my first in series books are getting older. So it's just kind of harder to get a BookBub for me. So the other day, my friend Juliana Hager, who was one of the writers that wrote the Willow Harbor series with me, she has 2 books in that series, and I have 2 books in that series. She mentioned that she had gotten her 6th BookBub deal of the year. And I was like, that is crazy, because I have not gotten any in 2 years. And she's like, well, keep trying. And so I sat down on Sunday afternoon and said, maybe it was Saturday, I guess. And I said, well, we'll just try again. And I'll submit these new covers, and just mention to them that the covers are there, etc. And I just got a message in between recording episode 8 and now recording episode 9 that they accepted The Trouble with Goodbye for a BookBub feature deal. So it will be featured as a free book in the new adult romance category on October 10th. So I will remind you guys when that comes up, because when it comes to the BookBub feature deals, if you guys can help spread the word, even though the book is permanently free and you could go get it free now, just getting the extra downloads. If there's any way I can get myself up into the top 100 or 200 free books over at Amazon and get a bunch of downloads at Apple Books or Google Play or Barnes & Noble and Kobo, then there's a lot of more readers that will discover the books. And I know some of you are probably, if you're readers, you're like, yeah, but you don't make any money off of a free book. But the thing is, if readers discover you and they love your free book, then they'll go on and they'll buy the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. And because this is a completed series, they can follow it all the way through. Now, most of these books, so 5 of the books are kind of standalone, where it's the first book is Leanne's story, the second book is Penny's story, and so on. So you could read them standalone. But it's so much better if you just read 1 through 6, because Leanne, who's the heroine for book 1, is also the heroine for book 6. It kind of bookends, and we see what happens with her in every single book of the 6. So It's a different kind of series for me. So even if you're here and you're like, I never read that kind of series, I only love paranormal or, science fiction or, speculative witches and different stuff like that. On October 10th, go and download that book and give it a try and try to help me boost up my rankings and stuff so that more people will discover the series. So very fun news going on there. Otherwise, we are moving into episode 9. So episode 8, if you're watching this on a replay a little ways after, if you're watching them back to back, you've just watched it, so you don't really need much of a recap. But basically, Harper goes to talk to Jackson in the soldiers' quarters, the male soldier quarters, and finds out that he has been also drawing this butterfly pendant. So there's something significant about that. But also, as they begin talking about it, he realizes just as much as she does that they're going to have to go back for Angela, which is Harper's sister, Mrs. King. And he understands, of course, that she's going to go after her sister because he did the same thing and went after his brother. And so they're in this together. And as they're deciding what they're going to do and how they're going to get home, they, of course, reach out to Marianne and Essex, who then travel to the Dome City to be with them. And as they're talking about that, they find out that Leah did not come because Leah's been really concentrating on the underground and the resistance leadership. And Jackson says that there was this plan that the resistance had to potentially just wipe out all the demon gates, which will kill all the witches, all the demons tied to the demon gates, as a way to destroy the order or weaken the order. And so Jackson is now afraid that Leah has become part of that plan and that the resistance is keeping their plan from them because they're planning to kill all these demons and witches, which includes Jackson's brother. So now there's a huge race against time. Not only they have to save Angela in time, but now Airden's life might be in danger as well. So that is where we're starting. And basically the last line of the last episode was, tomorrow we go back to Peachville. So here we are, episode 9, chapter 35, The Best Chance. Later that evening, the 4 of us sat in my living room, a map of Peachville drawn out on a large piece of paper in the middle of the floor. Jackson had spent part of the day drawing in the basic roadways and landmarks. My family's village is approximately here, Marianne said. She placed the red gemstone over the forest on the edge of town. We can use that as our base camp. All I need to do is set up the protection spell again. You can do that? I asked. How will we all get in, though? Will we have to swear a blood oath? Essex and I talked about this some before we left the underground, Marianne said. There might not be time to perform a blood oath ceremony every time we want to invite someone into our camp, especially if we end up with a lot of people who want to help. What else can we do? I asked. Using the Crow Village was a genius idea. I'd been scared we would end up running from the order the whole time, always in danger. If there was a way Marianne could secure the Crow Village, we might be able to hide there undetected for a while. I will cast the spell that my family originally used as a barrier, only I'm going to alter it a tiny bit, she explained. Instead of a blood oath to me or my family, a person wanting to get in will have to actually be carrying a drop of my blood. I swallowed. How are we going to get that to work? Before we left, Essex made a set of blue wristbands that will work like keys to the village. He put a drop of my blood into each of the bands, so essentially anyone wearing one will be able to get in. What if someone steals some of the bands? Jackson asked. We can't let that happen, Marianne said. We'll have to guard them with our lives and only give them to people we completely trust. I considered her plan. It was risky, but it was a really great idea. Do you think the blood spell is strong enough to keep the order out? It's practically impenetrable, Marianne said. A blood oath is one of the strongest types of magic. As long as we are careful with the bands, we'll be safe. Let's do it, I said. As soon as we pass through to the human world, you two need to go straight to the village to set up the blood spell. What about you guys? Marianne asked. Where will you go? I looked to Jackson. We are going straight to Shadowford. He met my eyes and nodded. We'd already talked about this part of the plan. Jackson and I would go to Winterhaven alone. Wait a second, Marianne said. She sat up straighter. You mean we came all this way and you don't want us to go with you to rescue Mrs. King? Angela, I said. Marianne reached out to touch my hand. Angela. The less people we take to Winter Haven, the better, Jackson said. If we go alone, maybe we can stay under the radar and rescue her before anyone knows we're there. They took her so you'd come after her, Marianne said. They aren't going to just let you walk in and take her. They'll have traps set up everywhere. Maybe, I said, but it won't do any good to have us all trapped there. If we don't show up at the Crow Village within a day or two, you can come back through to the Shadow World and try to get more help. Besides, if we don't come back, we'll need you to try to perform the ritual reversal to free Airden. If that works, it will change everything. So why don't we do the ritual first then? Because if it works, Priestess Winter is going to completely lose her shit, I said. She'll be so angry there's no telling what she might do. She might kill Angela just to get even. Marianne bit her lip. True, she said. We have to get her out of there first, if we can. Exactly, I said. And if we can't, then at least someone else will still be alive to try the ritual. Jackson handed her the witch's journal Andros had given us. The details of the ritual are in this book, he said. I've marked the page. Do you think it will work? Essek asked. If demons can be freed from their prison on Earth, this will change everything about the way our people think. If we could see our families again. His voice drifted off and he stared down at his hands. It's the best chance we've ever had of defeating the Order and freeing our kind from slavery, Jackson said. Marianne took the journal and tucked it away inside her backpack. I'll hold on to it, but I expect you to come back and get it from me in the village, she said. Silence filled the room. No one said it, but I knew we were all thinking the same thing. What if Jackson and I never came back from Winter Haven? Jackson finally broke the tension. Remember, once we get across the border to the human world, we have to be very careful not to cast any demon magic, he said. Essex, Harper already knows this, but demon magic works differently in the human world. There, our magic is fueled by the living things around us, trees, grass, even human life, if that's the only source available. A simple spell will leave a noticeable mark in the grass that can be tracked. No shifting or casting of any kind once we go through, not unless it's absolutely necessary. I understand, Essex said. Aren't we forgetting something important? Marianne asked. What? How exactly are we planning to get back to Peachville? She asked. If the ring you took made the portals inactive, how will we get through? It was a good question, one Jackson and I had given a lot of thought to over the past few days. There has to be another way through, I said. Coach King managed to come through the night he was attacked. He wouldn't have been able to travel far with his injuries as bad as they were. There has to be another portal between Peachville and this domed city, a portal the Order doesn't know about. But where is it? I don't know, I said. I rubbed at the muscles in my neck. Let's call it a night for now, I said. We've been talking through this for hours. We all need to get some rest. We're going to need our energy tomorrow night. You're right, Marianne said. I'm exhausted. We'll all stay here in Harper's room tonight, Jackson said. He stood and walked toward the bedroom door. We'll come back to this with fresh eyes in the morning. The three of them disappeared into my bedroom, but I sat there alone for a long time, staring at the map, wondering how in the world we were going to find that portal. Chapter 36, To Feel Closer. I sat on the couch staring at the map of Peachville. It was late, and I knew I needed to get some sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop churning. We had to figure out how to get back to the human world. I could go to my father and ask him for the location of the portal, but I didn't think he would tell me. He didn't want me to go back, so he wasn't going to make it that easy. The gate had to be somewhere here inside the domed city, and the other side must come out somewhere in Peachville. Coach King had been injured so badly he wouldn't have been able to travel far. If he'd come through somewhere far away from the domed city, he might have passed out or been intercepted by hunters before he got to the throne room. My guess was that the portal was actually somewhere near the castle itself. But where? I ran a hand through my hair and sighed. We didn't have time to waste like this. Every second we stayed here in the Shadow World was another second the Order had to torture my sister. The outer door to my chambers opened, and I sat up on full alert. "It's just me, Princess." Tuli entered, carrying a stack of blankets and a single white rose. "I thought you might need these since you have so many people staying with you in your quarters this evening." "Thank you," I said, taking the blankets from her. "What's the rose for?" She raised an eyebrow and walked toward the middle of the room. "These were your mother's favorite flowers," she said. "I am told she loved them so much she even had them planted at the lake near her home in the human world." "Yes," I said, wondering why had she really come to my room this late at night. Julie came to stand in front of the large map of Peachville. "Your father loves them too," she said. "He takes very special care of his white rose garden." I sat up. "I think he spends so much of his time in the garden because it makes him feel closer to your mother." She paused. "If, for some reason, you wanted to feel closer to your mother," she said, "you might also take a stroll through the roses sometime. There's a particular spot near the back corner that is especially beautiful." With that, she laid the white rose near the edge of the map. I gasped, my eyes wide as I stared at the rose. Of course, it made perfect sense. The white roses at Brighton Lake bloomed all year long, despite the weather. They were magical roses brought there from the shadow world. That had to be the secret portal. Why didn't I see this sooner? The black roses also held special powers related to portals. When Jackson had pulled me through to the shadow world from the Peachville portal, there had been a ring of black roses around it. In order to close the portal temporarily, we'd had to cut down the roses. The entrance to the underground had also used black roses. It made sense the white roses held a similar power. Somehow, the white rose garden here connected to the roses near Shadowford. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked in a hushed voice. I knew it must have taken great courage for her to go against the king's wishes. Tuli looked at me, her violet eyes gleaming with tears. "Ever since my family disappeared, I have mourned them as if they were gone forever," she said. "You give me hope that someday I may see them again." My heart overflowed with appreciation. "Thank you," I said. "I promise I will do everything I can to bring them back to you." I pulled her into a hug. She squeezed me hard, then wiped away her tears. With a sad smile, she bowed and walked quickly from the room. I got down on my knees in front of the map and picked up the white rose. I breathed in its sweet scent, then placed it down over the spot marked Brighton Lake. Chapter 37, A Life of Our Own Choosing. I crawled into bed next to Jackson. He opened his eyes and yawned. "What time is it?" he asked, pulling me into his strong arms. I pressed against him. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and the feeling of his bare skin against mine sent warm tingles through my body. "About 3 in the morning," I said. "This time tomorrow, we should be on our way to Winterhaven." He sighed. "If we can figure out where the portal is in time," he said. "It's in the White Rose Garden," I said. Jackson sat up slightly. "Seriously? How do you know for sure?" I smiled and placed a finger over my lips. "Shh," I said. "Marianne and Essex are sleeping near the fireplace." "How did you find the portal?" he asked, his voice low now. "Tuli," I said. "Well, she didn't come out and say it, but I know. Besides, it fits, doesn't it? It comes out at Brighton Lake." "The white roses at the lake," he said, laying back down and holding me tighter. "I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner. It seems obvious." We snuggled closer, and I breathed in the scent of him. I felt so safe here in his arms. Part of me never wanted tomorrow to come. "Is this how it felt the first time you went through the portal?" I asked him. "When you went after Airden?" "Not really," he said. "I was so angry back then. I wasn't thinking clearly or going in with any kind of plan. I was stupid back then." "I'm angry," I said, "but it's more than that. What I feel isn't that kind of raw passion. It's more like focus, like I know what I need to do and I'm resigned to it." "I know what you mean," he said. "When I went after Airden the first time, I just wanted to kill everyone in sight. I went in there thinking I would have to fight one battle and then it would all be over. This time, it's so much bigger than that. We're truly going to war this time, a war that could last for years. I sighed. Do you think we'll ever come back here? Jackson kissed the top of my head and ran his fingers through my hair slowly. Someday, when the war is over, we'll be free of the Order of Shadows, he said. Maybe we'll decide to rule the Southern Kingdom, or maybe we'll live in the human world for a while, but someday we'll have a life of our own choosing. I pressed my body closer to his. It sounds like a fairy tale, I said. Tell me what else we'll do someday. Jackson put his mouth close to my ear. Someday, far in the future, after your father has passed on to the afterworld, we'll have a child of our own, a son. I sat up and peered through the darkness at his face. Now I know it's a fairy tale, I said. You know as well as I do that women in the Prima line can only have daughters. Jackson smiled his half smile and raised an eyebrow. In the future, anything is possible, he said. And I spent the rest of the evening dreaming he was right. Chapter 38, One Way or Another. I woke before the others and left them sleeping while I walked out onto the balcony to watch the sun's rise. I leaned over the cool stone banister and placed my chin in my hands. Was I crazy for going back? I was doing exactly what Priestess Winter wanted me to do, expected me to do. I knew I was playing right into her hands. But what choice did I have? What kind of traps would she have set up around my sister? Would she block my magic so I would be defenseless? Was I really strong enough to survive? I shivered, thinking of all the possible dangers. Hopefully, Zara's crystal butterfly would prove useful in rescuing my sister, but how? I prayed I could trust her, and that Zara's note wasn't just another part of Priestess Winter's trap. My head swam with information, worries, questions. My toe tapped against the stone floor. In less than 24 hours, it would be done, one way or another. Below me, footsteps sounded on the tiles of the garden path. I straightened and looked down to see who was taking a stroll in the garden at this early hour. Silver hair caught the light, and my stomach twisted with nerves. My father. He was headed for the White Rose Garden, a place I'd seen him go to, think, many times in the past weeks. I glanced back toward the bedroom, then decided they were fine in there without me for a few minutes. I wanted to be snuggled in the crook of Jackson's arm, not arguing with my father, but I knew I had to talk to him. I had to ask him to give me the ring back. If Jackson and I survived, we'd need it to perform the ritual reversal and try to free Airden. He'd taken it to put it somewhere safe, but he'd promised to give it back when I asked. It was time to find out if he could be trusted. I took a deep breath. Then, as I released the air, I shifted into my demon form and flew toward the garden below. My feet landed beside the fountain where I'd spent so much of my time here at the castle. I reached into my pocket and withdrew a small red gemstone. It wasn't a coin, but it was the closest thing I had to one here in the shadow world. I brought it to my lips and made a wish. Then, with trembling hands, I tossed it into the water. Chapter 39, You Might Not Get Another Chance. My father stood just outside the garden gate, his hands wrapped around the silver railing as he stared into a sea of white blossoms. He didn't turn as I approached, even though I was sure he must have heard my footsteps. I moved closer, placing my hands near his on the railing. It took me a moment to work up the courage to speak. I wish you would come with me. My father didn't answer or acknowledge me in any way, and for a moment, I was sure he was determined to ignore me. Then, as I turned to go, he finally spoke. I still remember the day I met your mother, he said. I turned back, my heart racing. She was the most beautiful human I'd ever seen in my life. he said, a faint smile on his weathered face. She was so young and full of life, but in her eyes I saw an old soul, wise beyond her years like you. She saw things the way they really were, and she was so determined to change things. She really wanted to make a difference. I swallowed a lump in my throat. I tried to stay away from her, he said. I already had a human family there in Peachville, a wife, a daughter. I didn't want to destroy all that I had built in the human world, but your mother, she was irresistible, so beautiful. I couldn't speak for fear he would stop. I could hardly breathe. I'd been waiting for him to open up to me since the first day I'd come to the Dome City. Claire. Her name was a whisper on his lips, a prayer. He closed his eyes. I never should have left her there. You couldn't have known what would happen, I said. I know, but if I had stayed, he said, or if I hadn't broken things off, at least she would have died knowing how much I loved her. I drew in a nervous breath. Why did you break things off with her? He sighed. She was a prima futura, he said. With her mother dead, she was going to be initiated as soon as she turned 18, and I didn't have any way to free her from that bond. There was no possible future for us, and knowing that was torture. Is that why you left Peachville? That was part of it, he said. He cleared his throat. I already had plans to leave once I told her we were through, but I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Then my father died and everything changed. It was my duty to come back here and take over as king of the South. If I had known about you or about the danger she was in, I never would have left you both there. What about Angela? I asked. You left her. He nodded and pulled a hand through his hair. She was safer there with her mother, a reputable member of the order, he said. No one there knew who I was or even that I was a demon. Claire was the only one who knew the truth. My lips parted. My mother had known he was a demon. Did she know you were a prince? She knew everything, he said. I even brought her here once to meet my father before he passed. What happened to him? I asked. He shook his head, his jaw tight. He chose to cross into the human world to try to save someone he loved, he said. He gripped the railing so tight his knuckles turned white. He thought he was strong enough to fight Priestess Winter, to force her to release someone he cared for very deeply. After he died, and then your mother, I knew it was useless to try to save anyone once the order had them. I vowed that I would never be foolish like my father. He had a responsibility to his people, to me, and he threw it all away to save someone who simply couldn't be saved. That's why you won't go after Angela, your own daughter? He looked toward the front of the castle, toward the city beyond. Everyone in this city has lost someone they love to the order, a daughter, a father, a husband. He lowered his head. They are powerless to go after them or to save them. If I abandon this city to go after my own daughter, what am I saying? That my family is more important than theirs? That I care more for this one girl than I do for any of them or their loved ones? I placed my hand over his, and he turned to meet my eyes. Then let's save them all, I said. He looked away, pulling his hand from mine. You're so much like your mother, he said, like I used to be when I was younger, thinking you can change the way things are. Well, you can't. No one can. The order is so much more powerful than you know. We've sent armies to fight them, armies that have been slaughtered in a single afternoon. The best we can do is protect those who have not yet been taken. It's the only way. You're wrong, I said. Things are different now. How? We have the journal. I said. A true account of the Order's beginnings, written by one of the 5 original sisters. A true path to freeing the demons who have been slaves for so long. If we can break the bond between the humans and demons, we can destroy the Order and save all of those who are still alive. He closed his eyes and drew in a long breath. I wish I could believe that. Frustration became a raging river inside me. I'll prove it to you, I said. I'm going to save my sister, and together, my friends and I are going to perform that ritual, and you'll see. I only hope that once you see the truth, you'll find the courage to join me in freeing all the demon gates. My father turned and started to say something, but then shook his head and looked away. If there's something you want to say to me, you better just say it. I looked out over the white roses. You might not get another chance. My words carried a weight that hung in the air between us. The future was so uncertain. I thought of my mother and how she never really knew that he had loved her. She died with a broken heart, not understanding the true reasons behind his actions. Now, here he was years later, still regretting everything he kept from her. But would it make any difference in our relationship? Or was his heart so damaged he would never really let me in? His silence said it all. I waited longer than I should have, wishing he would tell me he loved me, wishing he would push past his fear of loss and find the courage to follow me to the human world. But he didn't say a word. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the blue ring. He stared down at its glittering stone, turning it back and forth between his fingers. Then, in one swift motion, he placed it on top of the silver railing and disappeared into the morning breeze. That's a hard moment because you just want him to like crack his heart open and just show like, let me know how you feel. But you do get a little bit more clarity there about what happened with him. And there is more to that story, which will be revealed kind of throughout the rest of this book. But he lost his own father because his father went to go save someone. And he feels that there has been, everyone that's gone, they have sent armies, they have done all these things. And, we're seeing this story from Harper's point of view because George is in the background. We're seeing this from Harper's point of view because she is the narrator of the story, but there are other stories at play here. He's, it's kind of like Essex says, like, you have to understand that this is the way it is for my people, not just now, but for 100 years, that everybody who disappears never comes back. So we just have come to, like, no matter how much fighting we did in the beginning, we have become resigned to the fact that once someone is taken, they are gone forever. And Harper has a unique perspective, which allows her to see it differently, but also she doesn't quite understand where they're coming from, but she's seeing it more and more but there is hope. As long as there's life, there's hope. So we need to try. We can't just, no matter how dangerous it is, we have to go after them. We can't just stand by and let this happen. And so you've got those kind of warring things. And the frustration, of course, with her father here is knowing that he has lost so much in his life and he's made so many bad choices of his own and seen people make bad choices that have led to so much heartbreak that he's just thinking, I have to care for my people and I have to save the people that are here now. And that's the best I can do. And that is my duty. And so you've got that theme for him of this is what my duty is. And Harper's like, but my duty is to save my sister, just like Jackson's duty is to save his brother. And, I like that parallel story there of, Jackson's duty is to his brother, but it should have been to Leah, right? He was meant to be the future king. And of course, you'll get that entire story of his duty and what all happened between him and Leah and Erden if you read A Demon's Wrath, which is technically the book that comes after this, although it's not part of the the main story series. So this is book 6. Book 7 is Emerald Darkness, but in between book 6 and 7, there's several stories to read. There's a short story called After Midnight that features one of the cheerleaders from Peachville. There's a story called A Demon's Wrath, which was originally published in 2 parts, but now is in like just one single book. And it's about 60,000 words. So it's a shorter novel. And that happens both in the present day of the time right after the end of this book, and it happens in Jackson telling the past of him and Leah and Airden. So you'll get a lot of that story. And I highly recommend that you don't skip that, because there's some really important, not only backstory, but information that happens in the present day stuff that happens right before book 7. And then there's also Sacrifice Me, which is a spinoff series that features some really fun, some of the most beloved characters. And you do kind of get to see some of the Peachville characters in that series as well. So that is it for episode 9. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Let me know in the comments if you like this. I have thought also, like, instead of watching me read, I could put up some kind of like photo of the book if it's less distracting, but I figure as long as I am here that you guys can see my face, because that's how you're used to hearing it read. But you can let me know any feedback or anything we might change. But it does make the episode shorter, so easier to get through. But that is it for today. I will see you guys again for episode 10. I will have it up tomorrow, Wednesday at 4 p.m. for you. And that's it. I know that some people are like, wait, but we didn't get to see Evie and stuff, but she is actually asleep right now. You've seen a few passes of Andrew. He's back there very quietly doing his homeschool work. But if Evie's up before we say the end of episode 10, I will definitely bring her on. Otherwise, we'll try to get her into the coffee chat on Friday. All right, you guys, happy Tuesday. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.